All right. So, Neil, I've been watching a bit of YouTube recently.
It's always a bad idea, Cam.
Yeah. A video by Peak Talk, actually, which was pretty interesting about Pogacar's saddle and the way he changes the saddle, particularly the angle, so the tilt, based off of different races. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on that approach and whether I should start doing that as a recreational amateur road cyclist.
Mate, if Hog does it, shouldn't we all do it?
I reckon.
I think that's probably the lesson to be learned here, or maybe not. So, I watched the video. You sent me the link, and I thought it was quite well done and quite a good observation. I don't look that closely at this sort of stuff, but I think the bloke was right. It does seem like quite an inclined saddle position, heaps of seats set forward for certain races, and the theory being that if the race involves a lot of short, punchy climbs of up over sort of 6% gradient, that as the bike rotates up, the saddle becomes more level, and the rider, as their pelvis rotates back as the gradient goes up, you end up with less trouble being out behind the bottom bracket. So it allows you to kind of stay over the top of the stroke on steeper gradients and keep the knee kind of pushing down rather than kind of being out behind the pedal. So as
producing more power thus.
It's a good question.
Or less fatigability, or what's the advantage?
I would suggest, so most of it is neuromuscular advantage if there was a physiological advantage. In other words, short burst efforts. It's one of the reasons you see XC mountain bike racers who've got lots and lots of tiny little burst efforts in their race as they go up and down really gnarly little bits of terrain. They often run the seat super far forward so that as the bike rotates up, their pelvis doesn't rotate out too far behind the bottom bracket, and then they kind of can't get over the top of the stroke. So it's the same kind of theory. It's difficult to measure how much assistance one would get from this. Yeah. There is no doubt that it is psychologically better. So there's this sense of being still on top of the stroke when your seat is forward and the gradient goes right up like that. You still feel in better balance with the bike. So there's I would certainly say there's a psychological benefit to it. It feels better, right? Whether that really means more power or not, it's a different kettle of fish, but it certainly feels better. And if something feels better and has no major downsides, it's probably a good idea. You might, because cycling is a hugely psychological sport. If the rider feels strong, they will often ride better. So, I think it's a legitimate thing to do. If you might see in something like Liège-Bastogne-Liège or the Amstel race or something, when there's a lot of those short punchy climbs, he does seem he's not shy about tweaking his position, which I think is great. It also, the fact that he can switch between these positions is a testament to his, how should we say this, functionality. So for a lot of people, that wouldn't be a great idea because unless they spent a lot of time training in the new position, they might cop an injury or something if they just do it on the day of the race, So you would definitely want to train and test the position out. Now, who gets away with it and who doesn't? And why does Pog get away with it? Why does he, when you shove the seat really far forward and tilt it down, one of the effects is it's going to load your hands more, right? So you're going to have more weight out of the front end. You're potentially more liable for hand numbness, neck pain, so forth, from weighting the front of the bike more than you otherwise would if the seat was a bit further back. How does Pog get away with it? Now, Newton's second or third law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. As you push down on that pedal, there's a reaction force lifting weight off your hands. The harder you're riding, the less weight there is on your hands. Now, if you're doing 400 watts all the time, or 500 or 600 up these climbs, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Especially when you're 65 kilos or whatever he weighs. There is so little weight on the bars because he's so powerful that the seat set forward is just a non-issue. Like, he would have to be so far forward, it's ridiculous, to actually start loading his hands to the point where he's going to get discomfort. So when you're a supremely powerful rider, you can get away with the seat being further forward, right? So if you're an average weekend punter, this going really forward and tilting the saddle down is going to have some negative connotations, especially if you're big in the upper body and not that powerful. And the more far down that spectrum you are, the more trouble you're going to have with hand and neck problems from this. So he's putting out a lot of power is the long and short of it. He probably does a fair bit of off-bike conditioning. His core strength is probably really good. His hamstrings are nice and mobile. He has good ability for his spine to exist in really deep flexed positions for a long time because he rides 800 kilometers a week in training, right? So this guy is optimized for cycling. So the more optimized your body is, the more you can get away with it for that particular thing. So he probably stretches a lot off the bike. He's got a strength and conditioning coach who helps him with all his physical issues. So, you know, for the average person, probably not so much of an advantage and potentially some downsides. But for someone like Pogacar, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, okay.
As long as he's not tipping so much weight onto his hands that across the other 150 kilometres of the ride where it's not like this.
Yes.
He's not getting hand and neck, you know, you don't see him doing this with his hands and stuff. I've never seen him do it. So he's obviously not getting any major problems from it. So I think it's a legitimate thing. It's one of those, I've always wondered if, I think someone actually made one of these, but I don't know if it came to market or gained any traction. But the other way would be to have an adjustable seat setback clamp. So you ride up to the steep climb, flick a lever, your seat moves forward 10 mil, 15
There's an idea for you, Neil. Start a business.
I think it has been made, but I've never seen one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think someone told me a long time ago someone made one.
Right.
And I think that's legit. The problem is you'd also need to raise the seat a bit as it came forward, so it would need to move in an arc a little bit. But there you go. Someone can take that idea and patent that, mate. That one's out there in the ether now. Because ideally, a variable seat height and setback device for steep gradients or not would have some benefits. Yeah. So I think it's definitely a legitimate thing, and if it didn't work, we probably wouldn't see it in the upper echelons of the sport. I think a lot of pro riders though are reticent to change stuff. They have their position and that's it, and they don't think about it any more than that. But to be able to vary it for certain races for those reasons, if the race has got a lot of short, sharp, pinty climbs, or it's an enormous mountain stage going up the Zoncolan or something, yeah, I'd consider it for sure.
Cool.